This is Barney Oldfield making the turn at Dead Man's Curve. He's coming down Wilshire, or he's coming to Wilshire now. He just came off of Ocean. Ocean going south towards Wilshire. You're going to turn left. It's a 90-degree turn. When he makes this turn, he's going to start heading uphill. And next time you're out there and you're driving up Wilshire, you'll notice, hey, yeah, going inland, makes sense. The coastline is over here. The water flows that way. Okay. But you don't always notice it, especially in your car, because your car will climb that hill no problem. Well, this was from 1912, this guy, and he's heading up the hill now. Again, up the main straightaway. Notice this is the years of chain drive, wooden spokes, and hair for helmets. And he also has a select kit on the side. This is from Meyer Beer. This is one of the first instances of a car having something on the side of it to advertise a product besides the car itself. Notice it says Fiat on the hood here. This is one of those 900 cubic inch four-cylinder monsters that could turn about 1,300 RPMs on a good day. But through gearing, these guys could get up to easily 90 to 100 miles an hour. And if you got a long enough, straight enough, smooth enough road, they could certainly do that. Well, they were a beast to handle, though. So that's our buddy Barney right there. Again, we're going to remind you of where the race course was. Started at Ocean in Montana, turned left at Dead Man's Curve, came up Wilshire, made the turn back down along San Vicente, make the S curve, and come back down to Ocean. 8.5 mile course. Newspapers called this Dead Man's Curve. Nobody ever died at Dead Man's Curve. Go figure. But you got to sell newspapers. You got to bring people out, the whole bit. The first racing incident, first racing injury took place at Dead Man's Curve in 1909. Car got out of control, kind of overran the corner, ran into a tree. The guy that was up in the tree fell out, broke his arm. First racing injury happened at Dead Man's Curve in 1909. They also thought, making a cue from the Motordrome the first few years, they banked the turns out of wood. Well, the races were 200 miles long, so they would start them early in the day, and they hadn't accounted for moisture on the wood, so the cars would slip and slide if they tried using the turns. So what they would do, they were always cutting it short and just making the turn on the dirt, as opposed to going up on the big wooden turns that they tried putting in. Just down here they did that, though.
So it was a dirt road at the time?
It was absolutely a dirt road at the time.
Just a hard-packed
Yep, hard-packed dirt road. In fact, the Auto Dealers Association, who put on the races, that was one of the reasons that Santa Monica allowed them to do that. They offered to grade the roads, but make them wide, make them flat, and oil them to allay the dust. What that did was that provided Santa Monica with much-needed infrastructure, because it costs a lot of money for a city to do that sort of thing. And so the auto dealer said, well, look, we'll grade the road, we'll make it smooth, we'll oil it, keep the dust down, we'll make the road for you if you let us run the races. And so that was the trade-off that the city was willing to make with the race organizers. So it was the real estate developers and the Auto Dealers Association. And in 1909, Harris Hanshoe won in Apperson Jackrabbit. And you could, in theory, walk down to the dealership and buy the same car that he just won in, because it was a stock car race. The idea of early auto racing was to prove that your car could actually survive 200 miles worth of driving. Because it's one thing for me to want the car, but I have to convince the wife that we need the car.
Race on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, if you were in a grandstand and you were looking across, this would be your view. This is the starting lineup, and you notice all the cars are lined up across here. Also notice in the background, we're looking towards the ocean now. There's a Pacific Electric car back here. They brought thousands of people in from Los Angeles. You know, it was a 3-hour ride in your car and about an hour ride in the trolley.
So this is Ocean Boulevard?
This is Ocean, right here.
Yeah.
And these guys are crank starting the cars, the start of the race.
Yep.
And you can see the media grandstand back here and all kinds of just neat activities going on. These guys didn't start as a group. They didn't do a pace lap and then take off like we see today. They started individually and they went against time. One of the reasons was it's dangerous for these guys to get together. Not only do they kick up a lot of dust from the ground, but they also kick up a lot of oil because of the splash oil systems, and so you got a lot of oil coming off of these cars when they go around. I have some video coming up. Proved a point. It's real easy.
Just one guy in the car, or
Two guys.
mechanic as well as the driver?
Yep. And if you were on the other side of the street and looking across, this would be your view. You'd see the main grandstand on the backside, and the cars would go between you and the main grandstand. And this would be looking east.
Who were the car manufacturers?
Manufacturers were Maxwell, Apperson, a lot of different companies that no longer exist today. Mercer was a big one that came out. Stutz came around in that same time.
How did Fiat get in there? They're foreign.
They made, at this time, the foreign manufacturers were far ahead of the American manufacturers. They'd just been at it a little longer. They had more roads. You know, Napoleon built the roads, so they needed to get around, and that was part of what came about. And so that's where they came from. And the guys wanted to win the races, so you would bring the best car you could. They were typically rich guys, so they would bring in the big Fiats, and they would just outclass all the other competition that was out here.
It's like a hell of a crowd.
Oh, man, it was great.
Unbelievable.
1909, they said there were 40,000 people that showed up.
Wow.
And in 1909, the population of Santa Monica was just several thousand. And so they just overran the place. But they're spread out over an 8-mile course as well. So there you go. I said by the time they were done in 1916 and 1919, they were having over 100,000 people would come out. It was the biggest events in the country at the time. Biggest events in the world was auto racing. It was the single biggest sport there was. Again, there was no radio, no television, no way of recording anything like that. So all of this was all just fledgling industry.
Yeah. And they were running 200 miles for a race?
They would run 200 miles. They were endurance races. Yep. Oh man, it was crazy time. Look at these guys.
These guys.
Why did they put two guys in there?
Two guys. You have the driver and the mechanician.
Mechanic has to do the brakes and everything.
Now, the mechanician has to pump the oil pressure up, make sure that was good. He also had to pump the fuel pressure up because they didn't have electric fuel pumps or anything like that. He also had to keep an eye on the tires, watch them as best he could to see if he could see any stuff flying off of them, know that it was time to stop. He also had to keep an eye out for cars coming around him. The drivers and the mechanicians never traded seats, you know, halfway through the race, trade off. Now, they didn't do that. He always just stayed and did his job. The other thing that happened is when you break down on the course, the idea, again, is to prove the reliability of the car. Typically, there'll be two people out for a ride, so you have to prove that you can fix the car with just two people, change a flat, that sort of thing. So if your car broke down up by the old soldiers' home, you had a couple guys come out and try to help you out, you'd be disqualified.
Yeah.
So you had to have somebody there that could help you change your tire and pull all that off. And so that's what they did. They had the mechanician with them. Now, if you got into the pits, you could use as many people as you wanted, because in theory, you're in the garage. So that's how that worked. Although the way it works in real life is get the biggest dude you can find the longest big ass stick you can find, let him get up on his toes to jack up the back of the car and change the
So it's a
tire.
stick he used to pry it up.
There it is right there. You can see here's the jack man right there. He's up on his toes, he's got the big pole, the whole bit. And these guys are changing the tires on these things. These guys also didn't have any safety equipment. I mean, like I said, I joke about hair for helmets, but that's essentially what it was. They had leather caps more than anything. The biggest trouble they had over the long haul was gravel and dirt and stuff flying up and hitting them. And you'll see sometimes old race car pictures where guys have that reverse raccoon look, you know, where their faces are all white. Well, that's because the oil's coming off the car, sticks to their faces, the dirt comes off of the road, sticks to the oil, and then when they're done, they take their glasses off and they got this reverse raccoon look thing going on, and that's where that comes from.
And no seatbelt.
No seat belts. The idea was the fuel tanks were all metal. And so if the car went over, chances are the fuel tank would leak and have the possibility of fire, and that was the thing they were most afraid of. They weren't afraid of landing, they were afraid of burning. So they wanted to be clear of the car. It's the old motorcycle thing, you know, the first thing you do when you start to crash on a motorcycle is try and get clear of the bike, because the bike will beat you crazy. Next thing you want to do is try and catch up to it so it doesn't get away from you. Third thing you want to do is make sure your friends didn't see. But in this day, yeah, it was still horse and buggy days. These guys grew up with the horse and buggy. And they were prone to tip over. In fact, it was until the 1930s where automobile incidents finally surpassed horse and buggy type of injuries and incidents, because it was so common to get kicked by a horse or dumped out of a carriage, all these kind of things. So these guys would try to catch themselves with their hands and all that sort of business.
So that's a Mercer that was there?
That was the Mercer.
There's the studs.
Here's the Stutz. This is Earl Cooper's Stutz. He won in 1913. Notice he's still got the wooden spokes. One of the key points on this one is that this is the predecessor to the car that's at the Peterson Museum. So if you go to the Peterson Automotive Museum, you can go in there and you can find the Stutz, and that's the one that came just after this. So, and this is Earl Cooper. He was a 1913 driving champion. He always rode with number 8. Most times when you registered They would assign you just a random number. He always requested number 8 for whatever demented reason. And there it was.
How many years did they run in Santa Monica?
They ran from 1909 to 1919. They skipped 1917 and 18 because of World War I. They also skipped 1915 because they decided to hold the races in San Francisco to help with the Pan-Pacific thing because the Panama Canal just opened up. So they had Pan-Pacific Exposition going on, and it was a miserable day. It rained out the races. The guys ran maybe 2 or 3 laps, and most of the drivers pulled off the course. The guy who won wound up winning at a speed of about 30 miles an hour because he just putted around the course and he just didn't give up. And that's the only. And had they run that same weekend in Santa Monica, they'd had a beautiful day.
Yep.
And they chose not to do it. They took it north, and they just
That's the end.
they
of
messed up the whole flipping
The
thing.
idea is shut down.
Hey, you know, they weren't dumb. They were just ignorant. You can fix ignorance, though.
Yeah.
So the other thing to notice about this is the car is leaning. And cars lean in these old pictures, and you see that, and you say, well, what the heck is going on?
Turning right.
Nope. Focal plane shutter. Exactly right.
Really?
When you think of a camera, I mean, the old cameras, you think of that, the eye opens and closes, the shutter, boom, boom, this kind of thing, right? Digitals, it's all ones and zeros. And that's all different. But the focal point shutter opens and closes this way. Prior to that, they had a focal plane shutter, and they used gravity, and it was just a slit that would fall, and it would expose the film on the opposite side. Through optics, it inverted the image onto the piece. They started using springs to speed up that operation, and they got pretty good at it. But at 90 miles an hour, the base of the wheel to the radiator cap, you're going to have about 24 inches difference. But what's happening is you're exposing the car to a thin slit, and in the time that it takes to go, the car has moved. And so that's why you get that lean. I always thought it'd be fun if the optics hadn't inverted the image, then the cars would lean the other direction. I don't know what fun.
Wouldn't be as exciting.
Yeah, and as a writer, it'd be kind of fun though, because then all the italics that we use would go the other direction too. I just thought that'd be kind of an interesting sort of weird way to go about it. So who were these drivers? Most of them